Hello, my name is Lauren Hayes. I served most of my life in the Navy, carrying out missions far from home, in places where trust meant survival. But when I returned, I found the hardest battlefield wasn't overseas. It was my own family. The people I loved believed I had abandoned them, and they tried to take the home my grandfather built with his hands. I didn't come here to fight them, only to be heard. And maybe, to be understood. The room fell quiet the moment I stepped inside. My father smirked. My mother looked away. And I realized I had walked into battle unarmed, except for the truth. The air in Portsmouth family court felt heavier than the late August heat outside. Humidity clung to the walls, to my sleeves, to the steady beat beneath my ribs. The fluorescent lights washed everything pale, like the world had been drained of color long before I arrived. I could feel the floor through the soles of my black shoes, cold, polished stone, the same kind used in military foyers. A surface meant to be walked on by people who were not allowed to show fear. I had not worn my uniform since the funeral overseas. Not since the flag folded in sharp corners was placed into my hands. Not since I promised myself I would not break again. But when the summons came, that neat envelope with the county seal pressed deep into the paper, I understood there are moments when silence is not dignity. It is surrender. So I came armored in the only truth I had ever earned. My father didn't stand when I entered. He only leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, mouth curled into that familiar shape, the kind of smile meant to erase me. My mother sat beside him, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes flicked to me for the briefest second before turning away, as though even the sight of me could set something dangerous loose. The clerk read our names. My father spoke first. "She abandoned this family," he said. His voice did not shake. It never did. "She left her home, her duties, her blood." I didn't interrupt. I didn't even look at him. I just placed the folder I carried onto the table. Tax statements, transfer confirmations, handwritten repair logs. A quiet record of every year I kept the property afloat while no one else lifted a finger. "I paid what needed to be paid," I said. My voice was steady, flat, worn smooth like riverstone. It wasn't defense, it was fact. My father scoffed, loud, sharp, theatrical. "She stopped being our daughter the day she joined the Navy." For a moment, the whole room breathed in. I finally looked at him then, not with anger, not with grief, but with the clarity that comes from surviving everything that was supposed to destroy you. "No," I said. "You stopped being my father the day you stopped listening." Silence. Wide, deep, final. The judge, Roth, had been quiet until then. He leaned forward, studying the insignia pinned to my chest, the name on my badge, the records under his hand. His expression shifted, the way a memory returns suddenly, sharp enough to change everything. But he didn't speak it, not yet. "Tomorrow," the judge said, "we continue." I walked out without looking back. The past would meet me again in the morning. They said I abandoned the house, but the house never abandoned me. The second day felt heavier than the first. Not louder, just heavier, in the way a bruise deepens overnight. The courthouse halls were the same, pale floor, humming lights, echoes of shoes and murmured instructions. But something in the air had shifted, like everyone knew now that this wasn't simply a family dispute. It was history standing up, asking to be seen. I took my seat without looking toward my parents. I didn't need to. I could feel my father's restless breathing, the tapping of his heel against the wooden floor, the way his jaw tightened each time my uniform entered his peripheral vision. My mother kept both hands wrapped around a tissue she never used. The attorney cleared his throat, a thin attempt at authority. "Your Honor, as we said, my clients were left to maintain the property alone. They were burdened, emotionally and financially." My father leaned forward, voice sharper now. "We struggled. We kept the house alive while she—" I set the folder on the desk again. Not dramatic, just final. 47 receipts, 47 payments, 12 years. The clerk handed them to the judge. Paper against paper, years against words. No speeches, no anger. Just what was true. The room didn't react. Not out loud. But I saw the attorney's throat tighten. Saw his hand twitch like he was already searching for a new argument he didn't have. My father looked confused first. Then something worse. Something like the beginning of fear. When the judge called for a 15-minute recess, the gallery exhaled all at once. I walked into the hallway, the air cooler there, quieter. My footsteps were slow, deliberate, not to show control, just to feel the floor under me, a reminder I hadn't floated away. My father's briefcase sat slanted on the bench, papers spilling out, not many, just enough to show they'd been handled too quickly. One sheet had slid out completely, resting face up on the floor. Final notice. Foreclosure pending red. Bold. Unmistakable. Not old. Recent. The kind of document someone hides until hiding stops working. I did not pick it up. I didn't need to. Some truths don't need to be spoken to be heard. My father approached then. Fast. Like he could still snatch back the reality already standing between us. His hand swept the paper up, movements sharp, desperate, graceless. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. The hallway was quiet except for a clock ticking near the exit. Slow, relentless. My mother stepped closer, not touching, not quite meeting my eyes. He didn't know another way, she whispered. The words trembled, as though she was afraid of them, afraid of the space they would change if they were allowed to exist. I said nothing. Her grief was not mine to carry. Her regret was not mine to answer. I walked back into the courtroom when they called us. No hesitation, no flinch. My father finally lifted his head and met my eyes. There, in the raw silence that followed, was the truth neither of us had ever spoken. This was never about me leaving, I said, my voice steady, unraised. It was about you being afraid I'd never come back. His breath caught, not a gasp, just a break, small, but unmistakable. The kind of break that happens when a story you've held for years finally cracks, and the truth beneath it sees daylight. He didn't deny it, not because he agreed, but because he had no ground left to stand on. The judge looked between us, not cold, not warm, just seeing. Tomorrow, the truth will be said out loud, not by me, but by the judge. The courtroom was full, but it felt like only 3 of us existed there, my father, the judge, and me. People had begun to whisper about the case by the 3rd day. Small towns don't need much to ignite a rumor, just a uniform, a last name with history behind it, and the suggestion that a family was being torn apart in plain view. I could feel the weight of their eyes when I walked in, but they weren't heavy. They didn't press. They simply existed, like fog against the shoreline, present, but unable to change the shape of the water beneath. I did not sit right away. I let my hand rest briefly on the back of the chair, steady, controlled. The ribbons on my chest caught the sunlight slanting through the tall windows, scattering a faint reflection against the polished bench. My father shifted, his jaw clenched. He was trying to maintain the same posture of authority as before, but authority only holds when others agree to see it. I no longer did. Judge Roth adjusted his glasses, but his eyes had already found mine, and in that look, there was recognition, not of me as I sat now, but of who I had once been. The faint nod he gave was almost imperceptible, but it landed like a hand on the shoulder, steady, grounding, real. My father spoke first. "She left us," he said again, but the words sounded smaller now, stripped of the righteous edge they once carried. "She chose a life away from her family. She turned her back on everything we built." I didn't look at him. I didn't have to. I opened the small ledger I had brought, thin, worn from being handled many times over the years. Not a single sheet crinkled out of place. Each page turned softly, like a quiet breath being released. Tax records, maintenance expenses, supply receipts, handwritten notes in margins from nights spent repairing a roof in the cold wind, or replacing the porch boards after a storm had taken them. I didn't speak. Truth spoken too loudly can sound like begging. Truth laid open is enough. The attorney cleared his throat, searching for an objection that didn't exist. Then I placed one final document on the table. Foreclosure notice. Red, clear, unavoidable. I did not look at my father. I just said, "The house was never abandoned. I paid to keep it alive." Silence filled the room. Not shocked silence, not sympathetic silence, just clarity. My father's eyes darted, not to me, but to my mother, as though she might hand him some line, some script, some shield. But she was not looking at him. She was looking at me, and she was crying without sound. Judge Roth leaned back, studying the document, then my uniform again. His expression changed, subtly, but deeply. Recognition settled in like an old memory resurfacing after years underwater. "Commander Hayes," he said quietly, not to the courtroom, but to me. "You were in Yemen. The flood evacuation." He paused. "The Silver Star." A ripple through the gallery, but no one dared speak. The judge's voice softened, not out of pity, but out of respect earned the hard way. "Your grandfather," he continued, "was my commanding officer. I was there the day he carved the post on that porch. I know what that house means." My father inhaled sharply, once, and could not finish the breath. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Petition denied. The property remains under Commander Hayes." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father said nothing at all. No one applauded. There was no victory cheer, only a silence deep enough to feel the weight of everything that had been lost, and everything that had been saved. The sunlight hit the metals again. Not bright, just enough. I walked out. Behind me, I could hear something break, and I realized it was not the gavel. Victory doesn't always sound like applause. Sometimes it sounds like a screen door opening on a quiet farmhouse porch. I didn't drive straight back after the hearing. I took the long road, past the marsh, past the old grain mill, past that narrow bend where the river glints like a blade under the sun. The season was beginning to turn. Late summer still clung to the fields, but the air had thinned just enough to hint at autumn waiting just beyond the hills. The farmhouse sat exactly where it always had, but it didn't feel the same. Not broken, not abandoned, but paused, as though waiting for someone to breathe life into it again. The boards beneath my boots were warm, sun-soaked. The paint smelled new, though the wood beneath it still held the memory of storms, laughter, and long silences. Ranger lay sleeping by the porch railing, his body curled, chest rising and falling in soft rhythms. He opened one eye when I approached, then closed it again, the kind of trust that feels like home more than any walls or roof ever could. The porch swing creaked when the breeze caught it. I sat, letting myself lean into the familiar sway. I hadn't realized how tense my shoulders had been until that moment. The wind carried the scent of hay, old cedar, and something faintly sweet, wildflowers drifting from the field. Strength without anger. My grandfather's voice again, as sure as if he were sitting beside me. The screen door opened softly. My mother didn't step all the way out. She paused, the way people do when they're afraid a memory might break just by touching it. In her hands was a framed photograph, yellowed edges, glass slightly fogged from age. My grandfather in uniform, smiling, holding a little girl with pigtails who had her arms wrapped around his neck, like the world hadn't yet learned how to take things away. "He knew who you would become," she whispered. Not as apology, not as plea, just as truth. I didn't reach for her. I didn't need to. I only nodded. She placed the photo on the porch table. Her hand lingered on it a moment, then fell away like she was letting go of something she had held too tightly for too long. Later, I heard footsteps, slow, measured, too careful for coincidence. My father stood at the edge of the porch. He didn't approach the swing. He didn't sit. His eyes went to the swing chains, to the planks of wood I had sanded and replaced, to the fresh screws holding everything steady. "You fixed it," he said. His voice didn't crack. Mine didn't either. "It was built to last," I replied. We didn't look at each other, but we stood beside the same memory. The silence between us wasn't sharp now. It didn't cut. It simply was, like a field after harvest, bare, but not empty. Something new could grow there, if someone chose to plant. He stayed only a minute, maybe two, long enough to breathe the air of the home he once believed belonged to him alone, long enough to see that it was still here, and so was I. When he stepped off the porch, he didn't say goodbye, and I didn't ask him to. He reached the truck, stopped, turned back, not to me, but to the house. His hand lifted. The porch light clicked on. Soft amber spread across the steps, the railing, the swing, the boards beneath my feet. Warm light. Familiar light. The kind that used to wait for me long after I was supposed to be home. A light meant to say, "Come back," without speaking the words. That light had not been on for 12 years. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He got in the truck and drove away down the gravel road, dust rising behind him, settling slowly. I stood there, letting the glow touch my face, my hands, the memory of every version of myself I had ever been here. And I realized, forgiveness doesn't come all at once. Sometimes it arrives like dusk, slowly, softly, willingly. Healing does not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes on a quiet Sunday, with the smell of wood smoke and autumn leaves. The season had shifted again, just enough for the air to carry a hint of cold behind the warmth. Maple Creek looked different in late autumn light. Softer, slower. The fields no longer burned green. They rested under gold. The farmhouse porch boards were dry and warm beneath my hand, and the breeze stirred the long grasses just beyond the fence line like a lullaby. Inside, dinner was already on the table. Not a feast, not a celebration, just roasted chicken, cornbread, and hot tea steeping in a kettle older than I was. We sat. No one spoke at first. Ranger lay beneath the table, chin resting across my boot. His breathing was slow, steady, like the calm after a long storm finally passes and the world remembers how to exhale. The clink of silverware against plates sounded louder in the quiet. Not uncomfortable, just fragile, like something new and unfinished. My mother passed the cornbread to my father, and he passed the plate to me, not looking at me, not avoiding me, just passing it. Plain, simple. But something in the gesture loosened something small and sharp in my chest. He placed an extra piece on my plate without asking. No apology spoken, no explanation offered. But it said enough. I talked a little. Not about the things that break a person, but the things that teach you how to stay alive. The sea at dawn, the sound helicopters make when they hover low, the quiet on a ship when the rest of the world is asleep. My father didn't interrupt. He listened. My mother smiled, not the tight, rehearsed smile she used to wear, but something gentler, something real. For the first time in years, we were not standing on opposite sides of anything. After dinner, my father stood, wiped his hands on his jeans, and said only, "Come with me." No tone, no demand, just an offering. We stepped onto the porch, the boards warm with the day's last light. He opened the drawer built into the old porch cabinet, the one that hadn't been touched since my grandfather's hands last closed it. He reached in, slowly, carefully, as though retrieving something alive. The compass. The metal was worn smooth at the edges, as if time itself had held it too. He didn't hold it out to me. He set it on the railing between us, neutral ground. "He always believed you'd know where to take this," my father said. Not his voice of command, not his voice of pride, just his voice. I picked up the compass. The needle found north immediately, steady, unwavering. "I do," I murmured. Not for him, not for memory, for myself. We didn't hug, we didn't cry. We fixed the porch rail together. One held the board, one drilled the screws, hands moving in quiet rhythm, task to task, breath to breath, like we had always known how, and simply forgotten. When we finished, my father reached for the porch light switch. He flipped it on. Warm golden light spilled across the wood, over our hands, over Ranger's fur, over the house that had waited 12 years for this moment. He breathed out, soft, like something heavy finally set down. "Don't be a stranger," he said. Not a command, a request. I nodded. That was enough. That night, I sat on the porch with Ranger asleep at my feet. The compass lay warm in my palm. The porch light glowed steady behind me, a light I no longer needed to turn on for myself. I was already home. I know many of you may see pieces of your own life in mine. The distance, the silence, the waiting for someone to choose to understand you. If you felt something in my story, I'd ask you to share your thoughts with me. Tell me what part spoke to you. Tell me what you would have done, or wished you had done. Healing is not loud. It's a handful of small decisions, to stay open, to stay kind, to stay standing. Support those who choose to heal instead of hate, and if you're carrying something heavy, set it down slowly. You deserve peace too.